Mira never thought much about destiny or fate. She was a practical girl, the kind who made lists and followed plans. That Tuesday afternoon, she had her whole day mapped out. Finish chapter 3 of her thesis, grab dinner at home, call her best friend, and maybe watch something light on Netflix before bed. Simple, predictable, safe. But life has a funny way of changing everything in a single moment. The rain started without warning. One minute the sky was cloudy. The next, it was pouring like someone had turned on a giant faucet above the city. Mira was 3 blocks from her apartment when it hit. She ran, her laptop bag clutched against her chest, and ducked into the first place she saw. A small coffee shop on the corner. The kind with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. She ordered a chai latte and found a table by the window. Her hair was dripping. Her shoes were soaked, but at least her laptop was dry. She opened it up and tried to focus on her work. Her thesis was about human connection in modern times, about how people meet and form bonds in an age where everyone is glued to their phones. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was writing about connection while sitting alone in a coffee shop, avoiding eye contact with strangers. That's when she heard the crash. A guy had just walked in, completely drenched, trying to balance an umbrella, a briefcase, and his phone, all at once. He wasn't succeeding. The umbrella clattered to the floor, and he nearly tripped over it while trying to catch his phone. A few people glanced up, then went back to their drinks. There was something genuine about his clumsiness, something real in a world that often felt too polished. He finally made it to the counter and ordered something. His voice was warm, but tired, like he'd had a long day. When the barista called out his order, she said the wrong name completely. Instead of getting annoyed, the guy just laughed and said it was close enough. That's when their eyes met. Mira was still smiling from watching his entrance, and he caught her looking. For a second, she thought about looking away, pretending she hadn't been staring. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he smiled back, sheepish and kind. Maybe it was the way the rain was still drumming against the window, creating this weird little bubble where normal rules didn't apply. He walked over to her table. She noticed his hands were shaking slightly as he held his coffee cup. "Is anyone sitting here?" he asked, nodding at the empty chair across from her. Her heart did a strange little flip. He sat down, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. It should have been awkward, but somehow, it wasn't. He took a sip of his coffee, made a face, and laughed. "I think I ordered the wrong thing. I just panicked and said yes when she asked if I wanted extra shots." Mira laughed. "I honestly have no idea. Enough that I might not sleep for 3 days." They started talking, and it was easy. Not the forced small talk that happens at parties or work events. Real conversation. He told her his name was Daniel, and he worked in architecture but had always wanted to write a book. She told him about her thesis, and instead of his eyes glazing over like most people's did, he actually asked questions. Good questions. The kind that made her think he was really listening. He asked her what got her interested in studying human connection. She told him about growing up watching people at airports, wondering about their stories, where they were going, who they were meeting, what they were leaving behind. He told her he did the same thing. He'd walk through the city and imagine the lives happening behind each window. Time did that weird thing where it seems to stop and speed up at the same time. One minute they were strangers, the next they were laughing about childhood memories and favorite books, and the time she accidentally sent a voice message to her professor instead of her friend. He told her about the time he showed up to a client meeting with 2 different shoes on. Outside, the rain slowed and then stopped. The sun started breaking through the clouds, creating these golden streaks across the wet pavement. Other customers came and went. The coffee shop started to empty out as evening approached. But neither Mira nor Daniel moved. Finally, the barista started wiping down tables. A gentle hint that closing time was approaching. They both looked around, startled, as if waking from a dream. I should probably go, Daniel said, but he didn't stand up. Yeah, me too, Mira replied, but she didn't move either. They walked out together into the fresh, rain-washed air. Everything smelled clean and new. They stood on the sidewalk, and that's when the nervousness really kicked in. This was the moment. The moment where they either exchanged numbers or said nice to meet you and walked away forever. Daniel pulled out his phone, and Mira noticed his hands were shaking again. Would it be okay if I got your number? I'd really like to talk to you again. I mean, if you want to. No pressure. He trailed off, looking embarrassed. Mira felt her heart racing in her chest. She hadn't felt this way in years. Maybe ever. Yes, she said, and she was surprised by how breathless she sounded. I'd really like that. They exchanged numbers, their fingers fumbling with their phones like nervous teenagers. When they finally said goodbye, Mira walked home, with a smile she couldn't wipe off her face. She kept replaying the afternoon in her mind, analyzing every moment, every word, every smile. That night, lying in bed, she stared at his contact in her phone. Would he text? Should she text first? What if it had just been a moment? Nothing more? What if she'd imagined the connection? Her phone buzzed. Her heart jumped. It was him. Just 3 words. Today was wonderful. She typed back, it really was. And just like that, everything changed. The next morning, Mira woke up to another text from Daniel. Just a simple good morning message with a coffee emoji. She smiled at her phone like a fool and texted back. By the time she got to campus, they'd already exchanged a dozen messages about everything and nothing. The kind of conversation that doesn't really matter but somehow means everything. Over the next few days, the texting became constant. Good morning messages turned into updates throughout the day. Funny observations, random thoughts, photos of interesting buildings he passed or quotes from books she was reading. Every time her phone buzzed, her stomach did a little flip. A week after they met, he finally asked her to dinner. An actual, official, this is definitely a date dinner. Mira spent an embarrassing amount of time picking out what to wear. She changed her outfit 4 times before settling on a simple blue dress that her roommate said made her eyes look bright. The restaurant was a small Italian place tucked away on a quiet street. The kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. Daniel was already there when she arrived, and he stood up so fast when he saw her that he bumped the table. Water sloshed in the glasses, but didn't spill. His face turned red. Sorry, he said, steadying the table. I'm a little nervous. Me too, Mira admitted, and somehow saying it out loud made it better. They ordered food, though later neither could remember what they ate. The conversation flowed like it had in the coffee shop, easy and natural. He told her about his family, about growing up with an older sister who used to make him play dress-up. She told him about her parents, carefully editing out the hard parts. First date wasn't the time for heavy stuff. Halfway through dinner, Daniel reached for his water glass and knocked it over. Water spread across the table, soaking the napkins. He looked mortified. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I'm such a mess tonight. Mira grabbed napkins and helped clean up, laughing. It's okay. It's kind of charming, actually. Charming? I just dumped water all over our table. Yeah, but you're being real. Something shifted in his expression. He looked at her like she'd said something profound instead of just being nice about spilled water. The waiter brought new napkins and refilled the glass. And they kept talking, the awkwardness melting away again. After dinner, they walked through the neighborhood, neither wanting the night to end. They found a small park with a fountain and sat on a bench, watching the water catch the streetlight. Daniel's hand was resting on the bench between them. Mira wondered if he'd hold her hand. She wondered if she should reach for his. The space between their hands felt electric. I had a really good time tonight, he said softly. Me too. How about this weekend? He asked quickly, then laughed. Sorry. Is that too eager? I'm not good at playing it cool. I don't want you to play it cool, Mira said. This weekend sounds perfect. That weekend turned into twice a week, then 3 times. Within a month, they'd fallen into this comfortable rhythm. Coffee dates in the morning before work. Long walks on Sunday afternoons. Movie nights where they'd spend more time talking than watching. They discovered they lived incredibly close to each other, just 12 blocks apart. How did we never meet before? Mira wondered out loud. Wrong timing, Daniel said. We met exactly when we were supposed to. Mira usually rolled her eyes at that kind of talk. But coming from him, it didn't sound cheesy. It sounded true. One evening, Daniel invited her to meet his sister. Mira was terrified. Meeting family felt significant, like crossing some invisible line. But his sister was warm and funny, and she welcomed Mira with a hug. Later, while Daniel was in the kitchen, his sister leaned close to Mira. I've never seen him like this, she whispered. He talks about you constantly. Just so you know. Mira felt her face get hot, but she was smiling. The following week, Mira introduced Daniel to her graduate school friends at their usual Thursday night hangout. They liked him immediately. He asked them about their research, remembered their names, and didn't try too hard to impress anyone. After he left, her friends surrounded her. Where did you find him? One asked. He's so into you, another added. Are you guys official yet? That was the question, wasn't it? They acted like a couple. They talked every day. They'd stopped seeing other people without discussing it. But neither had actually said the words. Neither had put a label on whatever this was. Mira wanted to. She wanted to call him her boyfriend, to know where they stood. But every time she got close to bringing it up, fear stopped her. What if he didn't feel the same way? What if defining it ruined it? Daniel seemed to be struggling with the same thing. Sometimes, she'd catch him looking at her with this expression, like he wanted to say something important. But then he'd shake his head slightly and change the subject. They were both dancing around it, both afraid to be the first one to be vulnerable. One night, lying on her couch watching a movie neither of them was paying attention to, Daniel grabbed her hand. Just held it, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. Mira's heart was racing. This was different from their usual casual touches. This felt intentional. Mira, he started, then stopped. She turned to look at him. Yeah? He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. She could see him fighting with himself, trying to find the right words. His hand was shaking slightly in hers. I really like spending time with you, he finally said. I really like spending time with you too. They both knew they were saying more than the words themselves meant. But neither was quite brave enough yet to say what they really felt. They stayed like that, hands intertwined, both wanting to say more but not quite ready. Not yet. But soon. They both felt it coming. That moment when everything would finally be said out loud. That moment when there'd be no more hiding behind casual dates and friendly texts. That moment when they'd have to be brave and risk everything. It was coming. They just didn't know when. 3 months into whatever they were calling this, Mira's birthday was coming up. She mentioned it casually one day, not expecting anything. Her birthdays were usually low-key. Dinner with friends, maybe cake at her parents' house if she was feeling up to the drive. But Daniel had been listening. Of course, he had been listening. He listened to everything she said. The day before her birthday, he texted her. Tomorrow evening, be ready at 7. Dress comfortable. That's very mysterious, she typed back. Good. I want it to be a surprise. Mira spent the whole next day distracted. Her friends at the library kept asking why she was smiling at her computer screen. She couldn't focus on her thesis. Action Repurgin. NE7. All she could think about was what Daniel might have planned. Part of her worried he'd go too big, too elaborate. That wasn't really them. They were about simple moments and easy conversation. When 7 o'clock came, she was waiting by the window like an excited kid. His car pulled up right on time. She grabbed her jacket and headed downstairs. "So where are we going?" she asked as soon as she got in the car. "You'll see," he said, grinning. His hands were steady on the wheel, but she noticed he kept taking deep breaths. He was nervous about something. They drove through the city as the sun started setting. The sky was painted in oranges and pinks. Daniel pulled up to a building she'd never noticed before, even though she'd probably passed it 100 times. They took an elevator that rattled slightly, going up and up and up. When the doors opened, Mira gasped. They were on a rooftop garden. Tiny lights were strung between posts, creating this canopy of stars. Real plants grew in boxes along the edges, and the city sprawled out below them, in every direction. In the center was a small table with 2 chairs. "Daniel," she breathed, "this is beautiful." "You mentioned it once," he said softly. "A few months ago. You said you'd heard about this rooftop garden and wanted to visit it someday. So I found it. And I called ahead, and they let me set this up." She turned to look at him. "You remembered that?" "I remember everything you tell me." They sat down, and he pulled out containers of Thai food. Her favorite Thai place, the one she'd mentioned she liked because it reminded her of studying abroad. He'd thought of everything. As they ate, they talked like they always did. About her thesis, defense coming up. About his new project at work. About everything and nothing. But there was something different in the air tonight. Something heavier. Something waiting. After they finished eating, the temperature dropped. Mira shivered without meaning to. Daniel immediately stood up and took off his jacket. "Here," he said, draping it over her shoulders. It was warm and smelled like him. Like coffee and something clean and cedar. As she slipped her arms through the sleeves, she felt something in the pocket. Something small and wrapped. "What's this?" "Oh," Daniel said, and his voice had that nervous shake again. That's for you." Mira pulled out a small box wrapped in simple brown paper. She opened it carefully. Inside was a bookmark. But not just any bookmark. It was vintage. Beautiful. With delicate edges. And it was, from the first edition of her favorite novel, the one she'd been obsessed with since high school. Her eyes filled with tears. "How did you find this?" "I've been looking for 3 weeks," he admitted. "You mentioned once that you'd been trying to find one, but they were impossible to get. I contacted some bookstores, checked online, and finally found someone who was willing to sell one. This must have cost so much. It doesn't matter. I wanted you to have it." Mira looked at him. Really looked at him. The lights above them made his eyes look warm and bright. He was watching her. With this expression she couldn't quite read. Hopeful, and nervous, and something else. Something bigger. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why what? Why do you do all this? Remember little things I mention. Plan surprises. Go out of your way to make me happy." Troder. Daniel took a deep breath. His hands started shaking, and he clasped them together. "Because..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "Because you matter to me. More than I know how to say." Mira's heart started racing. This was it. This was the moment they'd been dancing around for months. She reached across the table and took his shaking hands in hers. "You matter to me too," she said. He looked at their joined hands, then back at her face. He opened his mouth to say something else. Something she could see in his eyes was important. Was maybe the most important thing he'd ever say. Her phone rang. They both jumped. Mira wanted to ignore it, but it was her mother's ringtone. Her mother never called this late unless something was wrong. "I'm sorry," Mira said, pulling her hand back. "I have to." "Of course. Answer it," She picked up. "Mom?" Her mother's voice was tight with stress. "Sweetie, I'm at the hospital. It's your dad. He collapsed at home. They think it's his heart." The world tilted. Everything that had felt magical 2 seconds ago disappeared. "Is he okay?" "Which hospital?" Um, 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 her mother told her. Mira stood up, her mind racing. Daniel was already on his feet, keys in hand. "Let's go," he said simply. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Daniel kept one hand on the wheel and one hand holding hers. He didn't ask questions or try to fill the silence with meaningless reassurances. He was just there, solid and steady. When they got to the hospital, Mira's mother was in the waiting room, looking small and scared. Mira hugged her tight. Daniel stayed back, giving them space but not leaving. "The doctors are with him now," her mother said. "They think he had a heart attack. A small one," they said. "But they need to run tests." The next few hours were endless. Waiting and worrying and trying not to think the worst. Daniel sat quietly in an uncomfortable plastic chair, never suggesting he should leave, never making it about him. When Mira needed coffee, he got it. When her mother needed someone to call her father's brother, Daniel offered his phone. Finally, a doctor came out. Mira's dad was stable. He'd need to stay for observation and probably make some lifestyle changes, but he was going to be okay. Mira felt her knees go weak with relief. Daniel caught her elbow, steadying her. They stayed until visiting hours were over, and Mira could see her father, pale but alive, sleeping in a hospital bed. Then Daniel drove them both home. "Thank you," Mira said quietly in the car, "for everything tonight. I'm sorry it got ruined." "Don't apologize," Daniel said firmly. "Your dad is okay. That's all that matters." But as she lay in bed that night, Mira couldn't stop thinking about that moment on the rooftop, about what Daniel had been about to say before the phone rang, about the way his hands had been shaking and her heart had been racing. She was in love with him. She'd known it for a while but hadn't wanted to admit it. And tonight, she was pretty sure he'd been about to tell her he loved her too. But the moment had passed. And now, with her father in the hospital and real life crashing back in, she didn't know when that moment might come again. The next few weeks were hard. Mira's father stayed in the hospital for 5 days, then came home with a list of medications and strict instructions about diet and stress. Mira spent most of her time at her parents' house, helping her mother, making sure her dad was following doctor's orders. Her thesis sat untouched. Her routine disappeared. She barely slept. Every time her phone rang, her heart jumped, expecting bad news. She stopped responding to friends' texts. She canceled plans. She pulled into herself, the way she always did when things got tough. But Daniel didn't disappear. Every morning, there was a text. Nothing pushy, just "thinking of you," or "here, if you need anything." He showed up at the hospital with coffee and muffins, the kind from that bakery across town that she loved. He never stayed long or got in the way. He'd just hand her the bag, squeeze her shoulder, and leave. One day, Mira's mother pulled her aside. "That boy loves you," she said simply. "We're not." Mira started, then stopped. What were they? They'd never defined it. "It's complicated." "Love usually is," her mother said. "But that doesn't make it less real." 2 weeks after her father's heart attack, Mira hit a wall. She was at the hospital again, sitting in the same uncomfortable chair she'd been sitting in every day. The doctors had run more tests. Everything looked fine. Her father was recovering well. But Mira couldn't shake the fear. Daniel had texted earlier asking if she needed anything. She'd said no, like she always did. But now, sitting in that awful waiting room with fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant, she realized she was tired of being alone. Tired of pretending she was fine, Tired of pushing people away. She texted him, "Are you busy?" He responded in seconds. "Never too busy for you. What do you need?" "Just you, if that's okay." "On my way." He showed up 20 minutes later, slightly out of breath like he'd run part of the way. She stood up when she saw him, and without saying anything, she walked into his arms. He held her tight, one hand on her back, one hand cradling her head. She felt something break loose in her chest, something she'd been holding on to too tightly. "I'm scared," she whispered into his shoulder. "I know. That's okay. You're allowed to be scared." They stood there for a long time, her crying quietly, him just holding her. When she finally pulled back, her face was red and blotchy, and she knew she looked terrible. But Daniel looked at her like she was the most important person in the world. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get out of here for a bit. Your dad is fine. Your mom is with him. You need a break." She let him lead her out to his car. He drove to a quiet park, and they walked slowly through it. The weather was cool but sunny. Everything smelled like autumn leaves and earth. "I'm sorry," Mira said, "for disappearing these past few weeks. For being human," Daniel finished. "You don't have to apologize for dealing with a crisis. But I shut you out. I shut everyone out. I know. You do that when things get hard. I've noticed." She looked at him, surprised. "You've noticed?" "Mira, I pay attention to you. When something's wrong, you retreat. You think you have to handle everything alone. You think asking for help makes you weak. That's not." She stopped. "It was true. My parents got divorced when I was 15. My dad moved out. My mom fell apart. And I had to be the strong one. I learned that relying on people just meant getting disappointed when they left. I'm not leaving," Daniel said quietly. They sat down on a bench overlooking a small pond. Daniel's hands were shaking slightly, like they did when he was nervous. "I want to tell you something," he said. "I've been trying to tell you for a while now, but the timing was never right. But I think maybe there's never going to be perfect timing. Life doesn't work that way." Mira's heart started racing. She turned to face him fully. "I'm in love with you," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "I've been in love with you since that first day in the coffee shop." Maybe that sounds crazy. Maybe it's too soon to say something like that. But it's true. And these past few weeks, watching you go through this, all I wanted was to be there for you. To take some of the weight off your shoulders. Because that's what you do when you love someone. He paused, his shaking hands clasped tightly together. "I know you're scared. I know you have walls up. And I understand why. But I need you to know that I see those walls, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm not your dad who left. I'm not going to disappoint you and walk away when things get hard." Tears were streaming down Mira's face. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Of what?" "Of this. Of letting someone in. Of believing someone will actually stay." "I get it. I'm terrified too," Daniel admitted. "I'm scared of not being enough. Of messing this up. Of loving you so much, and then losing you somehow. My last relationship ended because she said I was too much. Too intense. Too emotional. She said I felt things too deeply. And it was exhausting." "That's not a flaw," Mira said fiercely. "That's what makes you you. Then your walls aren't a flaw either. They're just how you learn to protect yourself." He reached out and took her hands. His were still shaking. "But maybe we can be scared together. Maybe we can be a mess together. I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you." Something inside Mira broke open. All the fear and walls and protection she'd built up over years. It didn't disappear completely, but it cracked. Light got in. "I love you too," she said, and saying it out loud felt like jumping off a cliff. Scary and freeing at the same time. "I've been so afraid to admit it. Afraid if I said it out loud, something would go wrong. But I do. I love you. Daniel's whole face lit up. His eyes got bright and his smile was huge and beautiful. Yeah? Yeah. He pulled her close and kissed her. It was soft and gentle and tasted like salt from her tears and something sweet. When they pulled apart, they were both crying a little, both laughing a little, both shaking with the enormity of what they'd just said. We're kind of a mess, Mira said. The best kind of mess, Daniel replied. They sat on that bench for a long time, holding hands, her head on his shoulder, watching the sun move across the sky. Neither said much. They didn't need to. Everything important had already been said. 3 months later, Mira's life looked completely different. Her father had recovered well and was actually healthier than he'd been in years. The heart attack had been a wake-up call, and he'd changed his diet, started exercising, and seemed happier. Her parents were even talking about renewing their vows, trying to rebuild what they'd almost lost. Mira's thesis was finally done. She'd defended it 2 weeks ago, and it had gone better than she could have hoped. Years of work, finally complete. Her committee had asked thoughtful questions, engaged with her research, and at the end, her advisor had smiled and said, "Congratulations, doctor." She wasn't officially a doctor yet, not until graduation, but hearing those words had made everything worth it. And through it all, Daniel had been there, not in an overbearing way. He didn't try to fix everything or take over. He just showed up. He brought her food when she forgot to eat while writing. He listened to her practice her defense presentation a dozen times. He celebrated the little victories and sat with her through the frustrations. They'd settled into this comfortable rhythm. She had a drawer at his apartment. He had a toothbrush at hers. They alternated whose place they stayed at, though honestly, they were together most nights. Her friends teased her about being attached at the hip, but she didn't care. For the first time in her life, being with someone didn't feel like losing herself. It felt like finding more of herself. On a Saturday morning, 3 months after that conversation in the park, Mira was at her apartment, finishing some paperwork for graduation. She was still in pajamas, her hair in a messy bun, no makeup, looking completely unglamorous. When the doorbell rang, she assumed it was a package. It was Daniel, and he looked nervous. "Hey," she said, surprised. "I thought you had that meeting this morning?" "I did. It finished early." He was shifting from foot to foot, and his hands were shaking. She knew that tell by now. He was nervous about something. "What's wrong?" she asked, suddenly worried. "Nothing's wrong. Can I come in? I need to talk to you about something." Her heart jumped. Those words always sounded scary, even when logically she knew they were in a good place. She stepped aside and let him in. Daniel walked into her living room, then turned to face her. He was carrying a small bag, clutching it tightly. He took a deep breath. "Okay," he said. "I've been planning this for a week, and I keep losing my nerve. I had this whole thing mapped out. I was going to take you to that restaurant you like, maybe go for a walk after, find the perfect moment. But then I woke up this morning and I thought, why wait? Why does it have to be perfect? We're not perfect. We're messy and real, and that's what makes us work." Mira's heart was racing now. She had no idea where this was going, but something big was happening. "So, I'm just going to say it now before I chicken out for the 8th time this week." His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the bag. "I'm in love with you. I know I've said that before. But I need you to understand how much. You're the first person I think about when I wake up, and the last person I think about before I sleep. You're the person I want to tell when something good happens, or something bad happens, or something completely mundane happens. You make me want to be braver, and kinder, and better." He paused, pulling something out of the bag. 2 tickets. Your thesis defense is done. You worked so hard for so long. And I'm so proud of you. I thought maybe we could celebrate. These are tickets to Paris. I know you've always wanted to go. I know you studied French in college, and you have this whole list of museums you want to visit and cafes you want to try. He was talking fast now, words tumbling out. We'd have separate rooms, of course. No pressure. I just thought it would be nice to celebrate together. But if you don't want to go, that's totally fine. Or if you want to go with friends instead, I understand. Mira crossed the room and kissed him, cutting off his rambling. Yes, she said. Yes, to what? I gave you like 5 options there. Yes to Paris. Yes to celebrating together. Yes to all of it. Yes to you. The relief on his face was beautiful. He pulled her close, and she felt him let out a breath he'd been holding. They stood there in her messy living room, her in pajamas, him in jeans and a wrinkled shirt, holding each other like they were the only 2 people in the world. We don't need separate rooms, Mira said quietly. No? No. I mean, unless you want. I definitely don't want separate rooms, he said quickly, and they both laughed. Over the next few weeks, they planned the trip. Mira bought a new suitcase. Daniel practiced basic French phrases, even though Mira assured him most people in Paris spoke English. They made lists of places to see and things to do, but they both knew the best parts would be the unplanned moments. The random cafes they'd stumble into, the streets they'd wander down without a map. The night before they left, Mira couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety, but from excitement. She was lying in Daniel's bed, watching him sleep beside her. His face was peaceful, one hand stretched out toward her, even in sleep. She thought about that day in the coffee shop. How random it had been. How easily it could have never happened. If the rain had started 5 minutes later, she would have been home. If she'd chosen a different coffee shop, or if Daniel had gone straight to his car instead of stopping for coffee. 1,000 tiny choices that had led to this moment. But they had happened. They'd met. And they'd been brave enough to let it become something. Daniel stirred, his eyes opening. Can't sleep? Just thinking. She whispered. About what? About how lucky I am. About how scared I was to let you in. About how glad I am that I did. He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining in the dark. I'm the lucky one. We're both lucky, she decided. The next morning, they headed to the airport. On the plane, as they flew across the ocean toward a city neither of them had ever seen, Daniel fell asleep with his head on her shoulder. Mira looked out the window at the clouds below and thought about connection. About how 2 people can meet by chance and choose each other every day after that. Her thesis had been about human connection in the modern world. About how people find each other, despite all the noise and distraction. She'd written about dating apps and social media and the challenges of forming real bonds. But living it was different from studying it. The truth she'd learned wasn't in any research paper. It was simpler and more complicated than that. Love was choosing to be scared together. It was shaking hands and racing hearts, and showing up even when it was hard. It was remembering little details and being there in big moments. It was being messy and real and vulnerable. It was 2 people in a coffee shop during a rainstorm, deciding to take a chance on a stranger. It was all the moments after that, when they kept choosing each other. When they landed in Paris, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. They took a taxi to their hotel, and from their window, they could see the Eiffel Tower in the distance. We're really here, Mira said. Still, not quite believing it. Daniel wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. We're really here. They spent the next week exploring the city. They got lost on purpose. They ate pastries from street vendors and drank wine at cafes. They visited museums and wandered through gardens. They took too many photos and stayed up too late talking. On their last night, they found themselves on a bridge over the Seine, watching the lights reflect on the water. It was late, and the city was quiet. Daniel's hands were steady now, wrapped around hers. "I want more of this," Mira said softly. "Not just Paris. All of it. The boring days, and the exciting days, and everything in between. With you." "Good," Daniel said, "because I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in her life, Mira believed it. She believed in staying. She believed in someone choosing her, every day, over and over. She believed in love that was messy and real and brave. They stood on that bridge for a long time, just being together. Two people who'd found each other in a coffee shop and built something beautiful from that chance meeting. Her heart was racing, his hands were shaking. But they were together, and that made all the difference.